There is something about you that cannot be explained by coincidence. You did not stumble into this message. You did not find it by accident while scrolling through a feed filled with noise and distraction. Something deeper than habit brought you here, and if you have learned anything in the season you have been walking through, it is that the things which feel like accidents rarely are. You were drawn here because there is a frequency inside you that recognized something before your mind had time to catch up. That is not poetic language. That is the truth about who you are and what you carry. You are not like everyone else. That is not arrogance. That is an observation that you yourself have probably felt your entire life. In quiet moments, when the world around you seemed to be moving in one direction and something inside you refused to follow. You have sat in rooms full of people and felt completely alone. Not because you were broken, but because you were carrying something those rooms were not built to hold. You have tried to shrink yourself into spaces that were never designed for your size, and every single time something in you pushed back. That resistance was not a character flaw, it was evidence. You are a chosen one, and the gift you carry is not one that can be manufactured, copied, or transferred. It was placed inside you before you had words to describe it, before you knew how to ask for it, before you even understood what it meant to be set apart. The gift was already there, woven into the very fabric of who you are, waiting for a moment exactly like this one to be named. There are specific signs that appear in the lives of those who carry this kind of designation. Signs that most people dismiss as personality quirks or emotional sensitivity, but you have probably noticed them, even if you never had language for what you were seeing. The first sign is that your dreams have been growing more vivid, not just clearer in image, but heavier in meaning, as though your sleeping hours have become a second channel through which something larger is trying to reach you. The dreams do not always make sense when you first wake from them, but they stay with you through the morning in a way that ordinary dreams never do. The second sign is a frustration that has no clean source, a restlessness that rises up in you even in moments when your life looks fine from the outside. You cannot always explain it to the people who ask, because the frustration is not about what is missing. It is about what is waiting. Your spirit knows there is more, and it will not let you settle for less. The third sign is that you have been losing your tolerance for shallow things. Conversations that used to feel fine now feel like they are pulling energy out of you that you cannot afford to spend. You are being filtered, and that filtering is not rejection. It is preparation. The fourth sign is that you keep encountering the same message from different directions. A sermon you hear on a Sunday echoes a book you opened on a Thursday. A conversation with a stranger mirrors the thought you wrote down in private 2 weeks earlier. This is not coincidence. When the same message follows you through different doors, it is because the message was sent specifically to find you. The fifth sign is a knowing that lives just below your ability to fully articulate it. A deep internal certainty that your life is supposed to mean something specific, even when the evidence around you has not yet caught up to that certainty. You feel it most strongly when you are still in those quiet moments before the world demands your attention again. You are a chosen one. You are an earth angel. That title does not belong to people who have it easy. It belongs to people who carry weight that others cannot see, who hold light in their hands even in seasons when no one is asking for it, and who keep showing up even when showing up costs them more than they are willing to admit. You have been showing up for a long time, and something in the invisible world has been watching that faithfulness with a level of attention you may not have believed was possible. Heaven did not overlook you when it was handing out assignments. Heaven studied you. It watched how you handled the betrayal. It watched how you rebuilt after the disappointment. It watched how you kept caring in environments that did not deserve your care. And then it chose you, not despite those seasons, because of them. The painful years did not disqualify you from the gift. They were the curriculum that made you capable of carrying it. You are not reading this message as a distraction from your real life. This message is part of your real life. You are not stumbling through a spiritual season. You are walking through a designed preparation. The people who are called to change things, to break patterns that have held families in silence for generations, to restore what was taken, to pioneer what no one before them was willing to attempt. Those people always go through a season that looks like delay from the outside and feels like refinement from the inside. That is where you have been, and that is why this message found you today. The gift inside you is not waiting to be activated by a ceremony or a title or an achievement. It is already active. It has always been active. What is changing is not the gift. What is changing is your willingness to stop apologizing for it. You have not been waiting for this moment. This moment has been waiting for you. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that no one warns you about. It is not the exhaustion that comes from working too hard or sleeping too little. It is the exhaustion that settles into your chest when you have been carrying something invisible for a very long time, and the people around you keep asking why you look tired when, from the outside, your life appears perfectly manageable. You know the exhaustion they cannot see. You have been living inside it. And before this message goes any further, I want you to know that what you have been feeling is not weakness. It is the weight of being awake in a world that has not yet fully understood what you are carrying. There are 4 signs that appear consistently in the lives of people who are walking through a season of sacred waiting. Not casual waiting, not the kind of waiting that feels like boredom. The specific, heavy, disorienting kind of waiting that belongs to people who have been set apart for something larger than their current circumstances can contain. And I am going to name those 4 signs now, because I believe some part of you has been looking for someone to say these things out loud. The first sign is a wave of grief that arrives without warning and without a clear cause. You will be in the middle of an ordinary moment, washing dishes, driving a familiar road, sitting in a meeting that has nothing to do with anything personal, and suddenly a sadness rises up in you that has no clean address. It is not grief about one specific thing. It is grief about time, about the version of your life you imagined at 20 that looks nothing like the version you are living now. About relationships that dissolved before you understood what was happening. About a younger version of yourself who trusted more freely and got hurt for it. That wave is not a breakdown. It is your soul processing the gap between where you are and where you know you are supposed to be. It is painful precisely because you care, and people who do not carry a calling do not grieve the way you grieve. They move on more easily. You cannot move on easily because something in you knows that the story is not finished, and unfinished stories are heavier than closed ones. The second sign is that certain places and certain people that used to feel comfortable have begun to feel heavy. You walk into a room you have walked into 100 times before, and something is different, not the room. You. The conversations that used to sustain you now drain you. The friendships that used to feel safe now feel like they require a performance you are no longer willing to give. The environments that used to feel like home now feel like borrowed space. This is disorienting, especially when there is no dramatic falling out, no argument, no clear reason for the distance you feel growing. You start to wonder if something is wrong with you. I want to tell you clearly that nothing is wrong with you. When a person is being repositioned, the places they are being repositioned away from begin to feel misaligned. The discomfort is not dysfunction, it is direction. It is your spirit recognizing before your mind does that some chapters are closing, not because they were bad, but because they were not the final chapter. The third sign is a recurring dream or a recurring image of a door that has not yet opened. It appears in different forms for different people. Sometimes it is literally a door in a hallway. Sometimes it is a room you can see into but cannot enter. Sometimes it is a path that ends at a threshold you cannot cross. The detail changes, but the feeling is always the same. There is something just on the other side, and you are close. You have been close for what feels like an unbearable amount of time, and the closeness is almost harder than the distance was because, at least when you were far away, you could tell yourself you had a long journey ahead. Now you can see the door, and you do not understand why it has not opened yet. Here is what I want you to hold on to. The door in that dream is real, and the reason it has not opened yet is not because you failed an invisible test. It is because the opening of that door is being timed with a precision that you cannot yet fully see. What is on the other side requires a version of you that has been refined by the exact season you are in right now. The fourth sign is that the same message keeps finding you from different directions. A word from a pastor, a line from a book you almost did not pick up, a conversation with someone you barely know, a video that appeared in your feed without explanation. All of them saying something that sounds like a version of the same thing. This is not coincidence. When the same message follows you through different doors, it is because the message was assigned to find you specifically. The message is not lost. It is targeted. And the fact that you recognized it when it had arrived, the fact that something in you said, "I have heard this before," even if you cannot say where, that recognition is evidence that the message belongs to you. Now I want to speak directly to the pain underneath those signs, because those signs come with real, specific human cost. There are nights when the silence in your home feels less like peace and more like an accusation. There are mornings when you wake up and lie still for a few extra moments because the gap between who you are and who you feel you are supposed to be hits you before the day has even started. There is the loneliness of being misunderstood, not because the people around you are cruel, but because what you carry does not translate easily into the language that ordinary conversation runs on. You have tried to explain the feeling and watched people nod politely without really landing on what you meant. And after enough of those moments, you stopped explaining. You learned to carry it quietly. That quiet carrying is one of the most costly things a person can do, and I want to acknowledge what it has cost you. There is also the particular pain of feeling like you made mistakes that set you back. Like there were moments where you could have chosen differently and perhaps arrived at something good before now. Regret is one of the heaviest things a person can hold, especially when the regret is not about dramatic failures, but about small moments where fear chose for you instead of faith. That specific kind of regret has a texture that is hard to put down. I am not going to tell you that none of those moments mattered. What I am going to tell you is that none of those moments disqualified you, because the gift inside you was not dependent on your perfect execution of every decision. If it were, no one would ever qualify. There is a difference, and this difference matters more than almost anything I will say today, between being overlooked and being positioned. The world uses these two words as though they describe the same experience, but they do not. Being overlooked means you were seen and deemed insufficient. Being positioned means you were placed exactly where the next chapter requires you to be, even if that placement looks, from the outside, like you were passed over. You have been positioned. The seasons that felt like you were being skipped, the opportunities that went to someone else, the recognition that did not come when you thought it should, those were not evidence that you were deemed insufficient. They were strategic placements in a preparation process that you could not see the full shape of while you were inside it. The people who were built for what is coming do not get the warm-up rounds. They get the wilderness. And the wilderness is not punishment. The wilderness is curriculum. You are not being held back. You are being prepared. The waiting you have been in is not the waiting of someone who has been forgotten. It is the waiting of someone who has been trusted with something large enough that the preparation had to be thorough. There is a version of you that existed before this season who was not yet capable of holding what is coming without either misusing it or being crushed by it. This season has been building the interior capacity for what the exterior world is about to require of you. And I want to be honest with you about something. The repositioning process does not always feel noble while you are inside it. It often feels like failure. It often feels like confusion. It often feels like everyone else received a map and you were handed a compass with no directions for how to use it. What I want you to understand is that the compass is the point. You are being trained to navigate by an internal signal rather than an external map, because the place you are being sent does not have a map yet. You are going to make one. I need you to stop reading this as a person who is waiting to be chosen. I need you to read this as a person who has already been chosen and whose job right now is simply to stop arguing with the designation. The choosing already happened. It happened before you can remember. It happened before the hard seasons, before the disappointments, before the moments you would take back if you could. The choosing was not contingent on any of that. It was a decision made in a place that exists above the timeline of your life, and it has been working its way toward this moment through every experience you have had, including the ones that felt like they were working against you. You are not on the outside of the story looking in. You are the story. And the story is not over. It is not even close to over. It is arriving. If you recognize yourself in these words, if something in you said yes to any of what was just named, I want you to do one thing. Go to I'm ready vào bình luận bên dưới. Not because it is a ritual. Because saying it out loud, even in text, is a form of agreement with what is already true about you. And agreement has a power that silence does not. If this message has already been sitting in your chest as something you needed to hear, consider sharing it with one person in your life who is in a similar season. Not because I need the reach, because there is someone in your circle who is walking through the same quiet wilderness and has not yet found the words for what they are carrying. Your share could be the message that finds them at the exact moment they needed to be found. Like this video if it named something real for you. And if you are not yet subscribed, this is the channel that will keep showing up in the seasons when you need a voice that speaks to what is underneath the surface. You are not overlooked. You are positioned. And the position you are in right now is closer to the door than you have ever been before. Phần 3 có một điều mà người được chọn thường làm mà không nhận ra rằng họ đang làm nó. Họ chờ đợi cảm thấy sẵn sàng trước khi họ hành động. Họ chờ đợi sự rõ ràng hoàn toàn trước khi họ bước ra. Họ chờ đợi nỗi sợ biến mất trước khi họ tin tưởng vào bước tiếp theo. Và trong khi chờ đợi tất cả những điều đó, ngày tháng trôi qua và cái cảm giác chưa đủ sẵn sàng ngày càng trở nên quen thuộc hơn, cho đến khi nó không còn cảm thấy như là sự chờ đợi nữa mà trở thành lối sống. Hôm nay, tôi muốn phá vỡ vòng tròn đó. Tôi xin lỗi, tôi nhận ra mình đã bắt đầu viết bằng tiếng Việt. Hãy để tôi khởi động lại đúng cách. Phần 3. There is something that chosen ones do without realizing they are doing it. They wait to feel ready before they act. They wait for complete clarity before they step forward. They wait for the fear to disappear before they trust the next move. And while they are waiting for all of those conditions to align, the days pass, and the feeling of not yet becomes so familiar that it stops feeling like waiting and starts feeling like identity. You stop saying, I am waiting to be ready, and start saying, I am just not a ready kind of person. And that shift, quiet as it is one of the most costly things that can happen to someone who was built to move. Today, I want to break that cycle. Not with motivation, not with a speech about pushing through fear, but with something practical. Something you can hold in your hands and use before this day is over. Because the truth about chosen ones is not just that they are called to something, it is that they are called to something specific, and specificity requires action. You cannot walk into a specific destiny by staying in a general posture. At some point, the internal knowing has to be paired with an external movement. And that movement does not have to be large. In fact, the most powerful movements rarely start large. They start precise. What I am about to give you is not a productivity system. It is not a self-help framework dressed in spiritual language. It is a practice that has been used in different forms by people throughout history who were in the exact transitional season you are in right now. People who were standing at the edge of something they could not fully see, who needed a way to anchor themselves to what was true before they could find the courage to step into what was coming. I am calling it the Threshold Protocol. 3 steps, usable anywhere, no equipment required, no special training, no prerequisite level of spiritual maturity. You can do this in your car before you go inside somewhere. You can do it sitting at your kitchen table at 6 in the morning before anyone else wakes up. You can do it in a bathroom during a lunch break, when the weight of the day is pressing in on you, and you need to remember who you are before you go back out there. The Threshold Protocol. 3 steps. Step 1. Remember, one thing that you are grateful did not happen, not the things you are grateful for. Most people know how to list their blessings. This is different. This asks you to reach back through your story and find a specific moment where something you desperately wanted did not come through, and your life is measurably better because it did not. The relationship that ended and felt like destruction at the time, but whose ending created the space for something far more aligned to find you. The job you did not get, the one you interviewed for and prepared for and genuinely believed was yours, only to watch it go to someone else, and then discover 3 months later that the company went through something that would have cost you everything. The opportunity that closed, the city you did not move to, the door that would not open no matter how hard you knocked. Find one of those. Not to minimize the pain it caused at the time. The pain was real. But to remind yourself of something that you need to carry into this next season. You are being protected by a wisdom that is not your own. There are things that have been withheld from you, not because you were deemed unworthy of them, but because something that could see further than you could see at that moment understood that those things would have cost you the very capacity you needed for where you are going. Gratitude for what did not happen is one of the most sophisticated forms of trust a person can practice, because it requires you to acknowledge that the hand guiding your story has access to information you do not. Start there before anything else. Sit with one thing that did not happen and say, out loud or in the quiet of your chest, "Thank you for what you withheld from me. I understand now, even just a little, that the withholding was not rejection. It was protection. Step 2. Make a declaration that is anchored to the concept of sacred timing. In part 6 of this message, we are going to go deeper into the language of time, the ancient understanding of appointed moments versus clock moments. The difference between chronos and kairos, between time as measurement and time as meaning. But for now, I want you to have something simple and usable. A sentence, a declaration that you speak over yourself in the morning or in the difficult middle of a day when the delay feels unbearable. The declaration is this: what is mine cannot miss me. I am not running behind. I am arriving on time. Say it plainly, not with performance, not with the forced enthusiasm of someone trying to convince themselves. Say it the way you would state a fact, the way you would say the sun rose this morning, because it is a fact. The things that have been designated for your life are not sitting in a room somewhere waiting to see if you will qualify. They are moving toward you along a timeline that was established before you were born. Your declaration is not magic. It is alignment. It is the practice of bringing your mouth into agreement with what is already true, so that your mind can begin to operate from that truth, rather than from the fear that contradicts it. This step is about recalibrating your internal compass every single day, because the noise of the world will knock it off course, and the recalibration has to be intentional. Step 3. 7 minutes of practiced silence. I know that for some of you, silence is not peaceful. Silence is the place where the anxious thoughts get louder, where the unresolved questions push to the front, where the grief you have been managing all day finally finds a surface to settle on. I understand that, and I am not asking you to make the silence comfortable. I am asking you to sit in it anyway. 7 minutes. Set a timer if that helps. Find a place where you will not be interrupted, and then do nothing except breathe and hold the posture of someone who is open to receiving. You do not need to pray elaborate words. You do not need to meditate in any technical sense. You do not need to empty your mind, which is not only nearly impossible for most people, but is also not actually the goal. The goal is presence. The goal is to spend 7 minutes not doing, not producing, not managing, not performing, but simply being available. Available to the still small voice that cannot compete with the noise of your day. Available to the nudge that knows which direction to point you, but cannot get your attention when you are moving at the speed your schedule usually demands. Available to the part of yourself that carries the knowing, the deep internal certainty we talked about in part 1, the part that recognizes things before your mind can explain them. 7 minutes of practiced silence is not a spiritual luxury. For a chosen one in a transitional season, it is maintenance. It is the equivalent of keeping your instruments calibrated so that when the signal comes, you are able to receive it clearly rather than through static. And I want to say something about these 7 minutes specifically, because there is a reason this number keeps appearing in the practices of people who operate at high levels of clarity and creativity. Research into the patterns of human brainwave activity has shown consistently that there is a specific state the brain enters in the early moments of deep rest, not sleep, not full wakefulness, but the threshold between them, where the kind of processing that is associated with insight-free creativity becomes accessible in a way it simply is not when the brain is in its standard active state. 7 minutes is not an arbitrary number. It is approximately the window within which, when approached with the right kind of intentional stillness, the brain begins to shift from its default active frequency into a lower, more receptive range. A range where the kind of knowing that chosen ones carry can surface without the interference of the mental noise that ordinarily buries it. This is not a mystical claim. This is neuroscience. And the connection between that science and the spiritual experience of clarity that people describe after periods of intentional silence is not a coincidence. It is evidence that the practices wisdom traditions have been prescribing for thousands of years were always working in alignment with the way the human brain was actually designed to function. The silence was never about emptiness. It was always about reception. The threshold protocol, when practiced consistently, does something specific to the way you move through your days. It shifts your operating posture from reactive to positioned. Instead of waking up and immediately being pulled into the demands of the day, you begin the day from a place of settled knowing. Instead of being moved by every piece of news, every opinion, every disappointment that arrives without warning, you develop an internal anchor that holds you steady while things move around you. This is not emotional detachment. It is emotional groundedness. And for a person who is carrying the weight of a calling in a season of preparation, that groundedness is not optional. It is the difference between arriving at the door when it opens and being so destabilized by the journey that you do not recognize the door when you finally reach it. I want you to commit to the threshold protocol for the next 7 days, not forever. Not as a lifelong overhaul of your morning routine, just 7 days. 1 week of beginning each morning with gratitude for what did not happen. A declaration anchored to sacred timing and 7 minutes of practice silence. 7 days of that practice will not fix everything, but it will begin to shift the frequency you are operating on. And a shifted frequency changes what you are able to notice, what you are able to receive, and what you are able to recognize as belonging to you. The life you are walking toward requires a version of you who knows how to be still. Not because stillness is the destination, but because stillness is where you will receive the instructions for the next movement. And the next movement is closer than you have been allowing yourself to believe. If you are willing to commit to the threshold protocol this week, I want you to type "I receive" into the comments below, not as a formality, as a declaration. You are not just telling me you are willing, you are telling yourself. And the self that hears you say that, the deeper self that has been waiting for you to stop shrinking and start agreeing with what is true about you, that self will respond. Share this message with someone who needs a practice to hold on to right now. Someone who is in the middle of the waiting and needs something tangible to do with their hands and their heart while they are there. Subscribe if you are not already here, because what comes next in this message is going to go even deeper, and I do not want you to miss the part that was made for where you are right now. The protocol is simple. The protocol is yours. Begin today. There is a frequency that chosen ones carry. It is not metaphorical. It is not poetic language borrowed from a motivational tradition. It is a measurable, documentable, scientifically observable reality that researchers have been studying for decades. And what they have found aligns with something that spiritual traditions across cultures and centuries have been saying in different languages for thousands of years. The people who are set apart, the people who carry something that others cannot quite name but can always feel. When they are in the room, those people operate on a specific neurological frequency that is distinct from the baseline frequency of ordinary waking consciousness. And the reason that matters to you today is not academic, it is personal. Because what science has now confirmed is that this frequency, the frequency of the chosen, the frequency of breakthrough and clarity and creative insight, is not fixed. It is not something you either have or you do not. It is something that can be cultivated, restored, amplified, And the path to that amplification is simpler than you have been led to believe. Let me build this carefully, because I want you to understand not just what this is, but why it belongs to you specifically. The human brain does not operate on a single frequency. It shifts between multiple states depending on what it is doing, what it is experiencing, and what it is processing. When you are in a meeting, managing logistics, responding to emails, and handling the demands of an ordinary day, your brain is operating predominantly in what researchers call the beta state, a high-frequency, high-activity mode that is efficient for task completion, but is not the state associated with insight, with creative breakthrough, or with the kind of deep knowing that chosen ones describe when they talk about receiving clarity on their purpose. Beta is useful, but beta is not where the gifts live. The gifts live in a lower frequency range. Researchers call it theta. Theta waves operate between 4 and 8 cycles per second, and they are associated with creativity, deep learning, intuition, and the kind of relaxed but profoundly aware state that appears in meditation, in the moments just before sleep, and in the early minutes of practiced silence. This is the state you begin to access in step 3 of the threshold protocol. This is why 7 minutes of intentional stillness is not simply a calming exercise. It is a neurological shift. You are literally moving your brain from a state of high-frequency management into a state of low-frequency receptivity, and in that receptivity, things become available that beta consciousness cannot access. But theta is not the peak. Above theta, at the highest measurable range of regular brain activity, sits gamma. Gamma waves operate at 30 Hz and above, and they are associated with what neuroscientists describe as peak cognitive performance, the integration of information across the entire brain, moments of sudden insight, heightened perception, and the state that athletes and artists and innovators describe when they talk about being in flow. Researchers have found gamma activity to be significantly elevated in the brains of experienced meditators, in people during moments of creative breakthrough, and consistently in individuals who demonstrate what can only be described as exceptional levels of clarity and purposeful thinking. Gamma is not ordinary. And here is what makes this directly relevant to who you are. Chosen ones, people who carry a designation and a calling that is larger than their current circumstances. People who have been through the refining seasons and emerged with something that cannot be manufactured. Those people are already wired for gamma. The wiring is there. What the wilderness seasons have sometimes done is buried the signal under layers of stress, grief, disappointment, and the neurological residue of sustained hardship. The frequency is not gone. It has been suppressed, and what is suppressed can be restored. This is where Dr. James Rivers enters the conversation. Dr. James Rivers is a neuroscientist whose work over more than 30 years has been dedicated to understanding the relationship between brainwave states and human potential. Trained at MIT and connected to research conducted in partnership with NASA, Dr. Rivers spent the better part of 3 decades asking a question that most of his colleagues considered either too simple or too ambitious. The question was this: if the brain states associated with genius-level insight and creative breakthrough are measurable and observable, why are we treating them as though they are fixed traits of exceptional individuals rather than accessible states that any human brain can be guided into? The answer he arrived at, after research spanning what has been described as a 3,000-day study of brainwave activity across different populations, is one of the most quietly significant discoveries in modern neuroscience. And it begins with a pattern that appears in children. Children under the age of 12 spend the majority of their waking hours in theta. Not because children are more spiritual or more gifted in some vague general sense, but because their brains have not yet been conditioned by the relentless demands of adult productivity to spend most of their time in beta. Children are naturally in the receptive, creative, intuitive state that adults have to work to access. And within that theta state, gamma spikes appear frequently, spontaneously, producing the moments of uninhibited creativity and sudden understanding that we observe in children and often romanticize as innocence. What is actually happening is neurological. The theta to gamma bridge is open in children in a way that adult conditioning tends to close over time. Dr. Rivers and his team identified a specific mechanism by which that bridge can be reopened in adult brains. The mechanism is called brainwave entrainment. Entrainment is not a new concept. It is a principle that appears throughout physics and biology. When two oscillating systems are close to each other, they tend to synchronize. The brain, it turns out, is highly susceptible to this principle. When it is exposed to an external audio frequency through specifically designed sound, it begins to shift its own electrical activity toward that frequency. This is not a fringe theory. It is a documented neurological response that has been studied in peer-reviewed research for decades. What Dr. Rivers contributed was a precise, calculated audio protocol that uses two primary technologies, binaural beats and isochronic tones, to guide the brain from its default beta state through theta and into the conditions necessary for sustained gamma activity. The protocol is not long. It does not require years of meditation practice to produce results. It requires 7 minutes. 7 minutes of listening with headphones to an audio file that was engineered with the specific frequency mathematics that Dr. Rivers and his team identified through their extensive research. The product built on this research is called the Genius Wave. And I want to tell you why it is relevant to what we have been talking about in this message before I say anything else about it. The threshold protocol I gave you in part 3 ends with 7 minutes of practiced silence. That silence is the entry point. It is the posture of receptivity that creates the conditions for what happens next. The Genius Wave is what happens next. It is the tool that, when used in those 7 minutes of intentional stillness, does not simply allow you to rest, but actively guides your brain into the specific neurological state where the gift inside you has the clearest possible channel to operate through. The science and the spiritual are not in competition here. They are pointing at the same thing from different directions. What the ancient traditions called the voice of knowing, what chosen ones describe as the frequency of their calling, neuroscience calls theta-gamma coherence. Same reality, different language. And now there is a tool that helps you access it deliberately. I want to share a story with you. Not a statistic, a person. A woman who found the Genius Wave was not looking for a neuroscience tool. She was looking for a way to get through her days. She had been in a season of profound loss, not the dramatic kind that comes with a single clear event, but the slow accumulating kind that comes from years of giving more than she received, from carrying the weight of a family, a household, and a set of dreams she had quietly placed on a shelf because there did not seem to be space for them anymore. She was not broken. She was depleted. She started the 7-minute practice on a Tuesday morning before anyone else in her house was awake. She sat in her kitchen with headphones in and let the audio run. She told the story later of how, on the 3rd day, she sat down for her 7 minutes. And when the audio ended, she did not get up immediately. She sat in the stillness that followed and, for the first time, in what she described as years, she had a thought that was not about what she needed to do. It was about what she was supposed to be. The clarity was not dramatic. It was quiet, but it was the clearest thing she had felt in a very long time. Within 6 weeks of consistent practice, she had taken a step towards something she had shelved for 11 years. Within 4 months, that step had become a direction. She did not become a different person. She became a more available version of the person she had always been. The frequency that had been suppressed by exhaustion and grief, and the accumulated weight of a hard season had been restored, and the gift that had been waiting inside that frequency had finally found its channel. Her story is not singular. More than 19,000 people have now gone through the experience of the genius wave, and the pattern that appears consistently across their accounts is not that their circumstances changed overnight. It is that their internal clarity shifted first, and the circumstances began to follow. This is exactly how chosen ones operate. The shift always starts inside. The outside world catches up. Now, I want to speak to something that I know some of you are already thinking, because it would not be honest of me to pretend the thought is not there. I know that for some of you, $39 is not nothing. I know that there are people listening to this message who are in a financial season that makes any non-essential purchase feel like a risk. I want to validate that completely. The money in your budget is real. The pressure you feel around it is real, and I am not going to minimize that by telling you that this is an investment in yourself in a way that makes the cost feel abstract. What I will tell you is this: the price of the Genius Wave is normally $49. Through the link in the pinned comment below, it is available today for $39. That is the discounted access price for people who find this message. And it comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee, not a 30-day window that barely gives you time to form a habit. 90 days, 3 full months of using the practice, seeing what shifts, watching what opens. And if at the end of 90 days you do not feel that something real changed in your internal landscape, you get every dollar back. No questions, no process designed to exhaust you into giving up. The guarantee is clean because the confidence behind the product is genuine. I also want to say this clearly because there are counterfeit versions of this product circulating, and I want you to be protected. The only legitimate access to the Genius Wave is through the link in the pinned comment below this video, not through a search engine, not through a third-party site, not through any link shared in the comments by other users. The pinned comment. That is the only door to the authentic product and the only door that carries the full guarantee. And one more thing, the discounted price of $39 is not permanent. It is being offered for a limited window, and the number of people who can access it at this price point is capped. When the cap is reached, the price returns to $49. I am not saying that to manufacture pressure. I am saying it because the information is true and you deserve to have it. If the Genius Wave is something that resonates with what has been building in you through this message, the time to act on that resonance is not later. Later is where chosen ones lose the things that were meant for them. Now is where the designated ones step forward. The science is real. The frequency inside you is real. The tool exists to help you access what is already there. And the door to it is in the pinned comment, waiting for the version of you that is ready to stop waiting and start receiving. The season of deliberate access has begun, and it began the moment you showed up for this message. There is something I need to say before we go any further, and I need you to receive it, not as a transition or a segue, but as a full stop. A moment where this message does exactly what it is asking you to do in your own life, which is to sit with the hard thing before reaching for the comfort of what comes next. what was just shared about the genius wave, about the science, about the frequency, about the tool that exists to help you access what is already inside you, that is real, and it is coming for you at exactly the right time. But before we move into what is arriving, I owe you something first. I owe you the acknowledgement of what was taken, because chosen ones carry a specific burden that does not get named often enough. The burden is not just the weight of the calling. The burden is the arithmetic of the waiting, the calculation of what the years in the wilderness actually cost. And that calculation is not something you should be asked to skip past on your way to the breakthrough. The breakthrough means more when you have been given permission to grieve the cost of the road that led to it. So that is what this part of the message is for. I want to speak directly and honestly about what the years of waiting have taken from you. Not what they built, not what they prepared, not what they positioned you for. Those things are true and they are coming. But right now, in this moment, I want to name what was lost. Because you have been strong for a very long time. And strength has a way of requiring you to move past the grief faster than the grief is actually ready to be moved past. And the grief that does not get processed does not disappear. It goes underground and becomes the weight you carry without knowing exactly where it came from. The first thing the waiting took was relationships. Not all of them, but specific ones. The people who could not stay at the pace of your process. The friendships that required a version of you that the wilderness was. In the middle of changing, and when that version of you began to shift, there was no longer enough common ground to hold the relationship together. Some of those endings were dramatic. Arguments that said things that could not be unsaid. Betrayals that restructured your understanding of who you could trust. But some of the most painful ones were quiet. A slow fading, a growing distance that no one named until the distance had become so wide that naming it felt almost pointless. You watched people you loved drift toward lives that were moving in a different direction than yours, and you smiled at their milestones on the outside while something in you quietly grieved the version of the relationship that used to exist. Those relationships were real. The love in them was real, and the loss of them deserves to be honored, not explained away with spiritual language about seasons and reasons and divine repositioning. The people were real. The loss was real. The second thing the waiting took was momentum. There was a version of your career, your creative work, your purpose-driven path that you imagined would be further along by now. You had a picture in your mind of where you would be at this point in your life. And the gap between that picture and your current reality has not always been easy to sit with. You have watched people who started from a similar place arrive at destinations that you have been working toward for years. And you have had to make a choice, repeatedly, about whether to interpret that gap as evidence that you are failing or evidence that you are on a different timeline. Making that choice is hard. Making it every time a new reminder of the gap appears is exhausting. The momentum you did not build in those years, the runway you did not get to lay down, that cost is real. The career chapters that did not get written because you were in a season that demanded your energy for survival rather than for building, those chapters matter. They represent real time that real people like you spent in the wilderness when it might have looked, from the outside, like you were simply standing still. The third thing the waiting took was the freedom to dream out loud. There is a particular silencing that happens to chosen ones in extended seasons of delay. You start to protect yourself from your own hope. You stop saying the big things out loud, not because you stop believing them, but because you said them before and watched them not happen. And the vulnerability of hoping out loud and then having that hope sit unfulfilled became a cost you were no longer willing to pay. So the dreams got smaller in their public expression, even as they stayed large in the private chambers of your heart. You learned to give people the edited version of what you were believing for, the modest version, the version that would not invite questions about why it had not happened yet. And every time you edited the dream down to fit a safer container, something in you felt the compression, the freedom to dream without ceiling, without apology, without the protective armor of managed expectations. That freedom was taken, and its absence has shaped the way you have been moving through the world in ways you may not have fully named until right now. The fourth thing the waiting took was trust in yourself. This is perhaps the most quietly devastating cost of all. When you are in a long season of delay, when the things you believed were coming do not arrive on the schedule you expected, when you made decisions that you were certain were right, and they led to outcomes that did not match the certainty you felt, you begin to second-guess the instrument. You begin to wonder if the internal compass that you were relying on is actually reliable. You start to outsource your discernment to other people, to systems, to external validations, because your own internal signal has led you to places that did not look like victory. And the loss of trust in your own knowing is one of the most significant things that can happen to a person who was built to operate from the inside out. Because a chosen one who does not trust their own signal is a navigator without confidence in their own instruments. And a navigator without confidence begins to drift. I am not going to fix all of that right now. I want to be honest with you about that. Some of what was taken will only be restored over time through the accumulation of new experiences that teach you new things about what you are capable of and who you can trust. But I want to plant something here, in this acknowledgement of the cost, that will be important for the rest of this message. The things that were taken from you were not the final inventory of your life. They were what the wilderness consumed in order to operate. And the wilderness, as brutal as it is, does not consume randomly. It takes the things that would have complicated your arrival. The relationships that dissolved were the ones that would have pulled you sideways at the moment you needed to go straight. The momentum that did not build was building something deeper instead, a foundation of character that surface-level momentum cannot manufacture. The silencing of the big dreams was temporary insulation against the kind of premature exposure that causes people to arrive at their calling before they have the interior capacity to sustain it. And the erosion of self-trust, as painful as it was stripping away a confidence that was built on your own understanding, rather than on the deeper knowing that does not require your circumstances to confirm it. None of that makes the cost painless. I am not asking you to feel grateful for the pain right now. I am asking you to sit with the reality that nothing important that was taken from you is beyond restoration. Not the relationships, because new ones are forming right now in the invisible spaces between where you are and where you are going. Not the momentum, because chosen ones do not build gradually toward their destiny. They arrive at it, and then everything accelerates in a way that makes the years of delay seem, in retrospect, almost incomprehensibly efficient. Not the capacity to dream out loud, because the dreams that have been protected in private are about to be too large to keep contained. And not the trust in yourself, right? Because the internal signal that has been guiding you through this season, even when you doubted it, even when you argued with it, even when you silenced it because the pain of listening was too much, that signal has not failed you. It has been navigating you through terrain that required more precision than you could see at the time. I want to tell you about someone who understood this cost from the inside. His name was Joseph, and I want to tell you only the hard part of his story right now, because the triumphant ending is not what this moment is about. Joseph was a young man who carried a dream so large that the people closest to him could not hold it with him. His own brothers, the people who were supposed to be his closest allies in the world, could not tolerate the size of what he was carrying. And what they did about it was not subtle. They threw him into a pit. They sold him. They covered the evidence and went home. Joseph went from being his father's most beloved son to being the property of strangers in a single day. And then it got worse. In a foreign land, in a foreign household, he did what any person of character does in adversity. He worked with integrity. He served with excellence. He built something real, and then a lie destroyed it, and he found himself not just displaced but imprisoned. Years. Joseph spent years in a season that had taken from him his family, his freedom, his country, his name, and the timeline he might have imagined for the dream he was carrying. He did not have a mentor in that prison cell who came to tell him that the breakthrough was coming. He did not have a message like this one that named what he was going through and gave it a framework. He had the dream in his heart and a dungeon around his body, and the arithmetic of what had been taken accumulating day after day. I am not going to tell you what happened next for Joseph right now. That part of the story belongs to a later moment in this message, but I want you to sit with this part, with the years, with the cost, with the reality that the person who was being prepared for one of the most significant destinies in recorded history spent a profound portion of that preparation in conditions that looked, from the outside, like complete and total failure. You are not failing. You are in the part of the story that comes before the part everyone talks about. And the part everyone talks about is already in motion. Sit with the cost for a moment. Honor it. Let it be real, because you cannot fully receive what is coming if you are still carrying the unacknowledged weight of what was taken. The grief is allowed, and it will not have the last word. Before I write this part, I want to complete the 3 internal steps that this section requires, because the integrity of what follows depends on the precision of what I choose to bring into it. Step 1. The core emotion of this video, based on the title and the arc of what has been built so far, is the ache of feeling set apart without yet seeing the evidence that the designation is real. It is the tension between knowing you were made for something and living in circumstances that do not yet reflect that knowing. The emotion is not despair. It is the particular weight of a person who believes but has been waiting long enough that the believing has become costly. Step 2. From the 8-time concepts available, after removing any that may have been used in prior sessions, the 2 most aligned with this core emotion are kairos, the concept of appointed time versus clock time, and kava, the ancient concept of waiting as the active braiding of strength rather than passive endurance. These 2 concepts speak directly to someone who has been in a long season and needs their understanding of that season restructured at the level of meaning rather than simply encouraged at the level of feeling. Step 3. Kairos is chosen because the person in this season needs to understand that the timeline they are measuring against is the wrong kind of timeline entirely. Clock time tells them they are behind. Sacred time tells them they are exactly on schedule. Kava is chosen because the image of braiding, of rope being made stronger by the twisting together of individual strands, directly addresses the question of what the years of waiting were actually doing to the person who was inside them. Fun 6. There is a word in the ancient Greek language that does not translate cleanly into modern English, And that failure of translation is part of why so many chosen ones have been measuring themselves against the wrong kind of clock. The word is kairos, and the reason it matters to you right now in this specific season of your life is that the framework you have been using to evaluate where you are and whether you are on track was built on a different word entirely. It was built on chronos. And chronos and kairos are not variations of the same concept. They are describing two completely different realities. Chronos is clock time. It is the time that moves in a straight line from past to future, measured in seconds and minutes and days and years. Quantifiable and trackable and entirely indifferent to meaning. Chronos does not know the difference between a year of preparation and a year of stagnation. It counts them the same. It does not know the difference between a decade of refinement and a decade of waste. It assigns them equal weight. Chronos is the time that your calendar operates on, the time that measures how old you are and how long you have been waiting, and how far behind you are from the schedule you set for yourself at 20. 2. Chronos is the time that sends you the message, without malice but without mercy either, that you are running out of it. Kairos is something else entirely. Kairos is the time of the right moment, the appointed moment. The moment that was not measured by a clock but by a readiness, a convergence, an alignment of conditions that had to be assembled across invisible dimensions before the door could open. In ancient usage, Kairos described the critical moment in an archer's release, the precise instant when the arrow had to leave the bow for the trajectory to be true. Not a moment before, not a moment after. The exact moment when everything was aligned for the shot to land where it was intended. That precision was not accidental. It was the product of the archer's entire preparation, distilled into a single point of release. You have been measuring your life in chronos. You have been counting years and comparing timelines and asking the clock why things have not arrived yet. And the clock has no answer for you because the clock was never the instrument that was governing your story. Kairos was. The appointed time was. And the appointed time does not answer to the question of how long it has been. It answers to the question of whether the conditions are now aligned for what was promised to be released. Here is what I want you to understand about the conditions that Kairos requires. They are not arbitrary. They are not a divine test designed to see how patient you can be as a measure of your worthiness. The conditions that Kairos requires are specific to the weight of what is being prepared for you. A small delivery does not require an elaborate preparation. A letter can be placed in a mailbox. But an organ transplant requires a surgical team, a sterile environment, a precisely matched recipient, a trained surgeon, a recovery protocol, and a dozen other conditions that all have to be present simultaneously before the procedure can begin. The complexity of the preparation is proportional to the significance of what is being delivered, and what is being prepared for you is not a small delivery. What is coming into your life in this next season is something that required the exact degree of preparation that the exact wilderness you have been walking through was designed to produce. The appointed time is not late. The appointed time is precise. Now I want to give you a second word. This one is ancient Hebrew. The word is kava, and it is most commonly translated in English as wait. But that translation is one of the great losses in the journey of this word from its original language into ours. Because kava does not mean wait in the sense of sitting passively in a room until something arrives. Kava is a word drawn from the world of ancient craftwork. It is the word used to describe the process of braiding or twisting multiple strands together to form a rope. And the reason that image matters is what it reveals about what has actually been happening to you during the years you thought you were simply waiting. When a craftsman's braids rope, each individual strand that goes into the braid is weaker than the finished product. A single strand can be broken relatively easily. But when multiple strands are twisted together in the specific pattern of braiding, the resulting rope carries a tensile strength that none of the individual strands possessed on their own. The twisting does not weaken the strands. It transforms them. The friction of the process, the tension of each strand being pulled against the others, the pressure of the braiding motion itself, all of that is not incidental to the strength of the finished rope. It is precisely what produces it. There is no shortcut to a strong rope. The braiding has to happen. The tension has to be applied. The time under pressure has to be logged. The years you have been in this season have been the braiding. Every relationship that required more of you than you felt you had to give was another strand being woven into the rope. Every moment of disappointment that you survived without becoming bitter was another strand. Every dream you held onto in private when it would have been easier to let it go was another strand. Every morning you showed up for your life in a season that gave you very little evidence that showing up was worth it, that was another strand. You were not waiting. You were being braided. The person you are now is not the same as the person who entered this season. Not because the difficult things changed you into someone different, but because the tension of the process wove together dimensions of your character that existed separately before and now form something with a tensile strength that your earlier self did not possess. You were not delayed. You were being assembled. And I want to add a third concept to this part of the conversation because it belongs here, and because it will speak to something that has been sitting in the back of your heart without a name. The concept is what ancient traditions call the wilderness season. The Makom Hamidbar in Hebrew tradition, the place of the desert, the place of stripped down, reduced, disorienting isolation, that appears in the stories of virtually every person who was being prepared for a significant calling. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before he stood in front of Pharaoh. Israel spent 40 years in the desert before they entered the land that had been promised. John the Baptist lived in the wilderness before he stepped into his assignment. Jesus was led into the wilderness immediately after his calling was confirmed, before his public ministry began. The wilderness is not the absence of divine attention. The wilderness is the presence of a very specific kind of divine attention, the kind that does not intervene to make things comfortable, but instead uses the discomfort itself as the instrument of preparation. The wilderness strips away the things you were relying on that you were not supposed to be relying on. The external validations, the social structures that were giving you a sense of identity that was borrowed rather than intrinsic. The approval systems that were telling you who you were in language that came from outside rather than from the deep interior, knowing that chosen ones are supposed to operate from. The wilderness is not comfortable. It was never designed to be. It was designed to be clarifying, and the clarity it produces is of a kind that cannot be produced any other way, because it is the clarity that comes when everything else has been removed, and what remains is only what is essential. What remains in you right now is essential. The things that were stripped away in your wilderness season were not your core. They were the scaffolding. And scaffolding is only necessary during construction. When the structure is complete, the scaffolding comes down, not because it failed, because its job is done. I want you to sit with one more image before this section closes. The image is from the book of Habakkuk, chapter 2, verse 3. Written not as a chapter and verse reference, but as a moment of direct address from a prophet who was himself in a confusing season where the evidence did not match the promise. The prophet wrote, in the language that has been translated across centuries, that the vision is for an appointed time, that it speaks of the end and will not lie, that though it seems slow, we are to wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not delay. The word translated as wait in that passage is kava. The appointed time and the active braiding were placed in the same verse intentionally, because the braiding is what you do while you move toward the appointed time, and the appointed time is what makes the braiding worth every strand. What the divine has appointed for your life, no delay has the authority to cancel. What has been designated for you by a wisdom that operates outside of Chronos cannot be stolen by the passing of time in Chronos. The clock does not govern the promise. Kairos does. And Kairos says that the moment is not late. The moment is now being assembled with a precision you could not see from inside the wilderness. And the wilderness, as hard as it has been, as much as it has taken, as long as it has lasted, was not your punishment. It was your preparation. It was the braiding. It was the stripping away. It was the appointed curriculum of a chosen one who was being made ready for an appointed time. You were not delayed. You were not forgotten. You were not passed over or deemed insufficient or left behind while others moved ahead without you. You were being braided into something that the strands alone could never have been. And the rope that has been forming through everything you have walked through is stronger than anything your earlier self could have carried. That strength is about to be required. And it is in you already. Now the appointed time does not announce itself with fanfare. It arrives quietly, and then everything changes at once. There is a shift happening right now that is not visible yet on the surface of your life. It is the kind of shift that moves first in the unseen places, in the interior architecture of who you are and what you are becoming, before it shows up in the circumstances that other people can observe. And I want to speak to that shift with as much specificity as I can, because chosen ones in transitional seasons often make the mistake of looking for the evidence in the wrong places. They look for it in their bank account, or their relationship status, or their career trajectory, or the number of people who recognize what they carry. But the first evidence of a major shift always appears inside, in the quality of your thoughts, in the texture of your peace, in the subtle but unmistakable sense that something that was locked is beginning to move. You may have already felt it, a moment this week or this month where something inside you shifted slightly, and you could not explain it, but you knew it was significant. That was not your imagination. That was the appointed time beginning its arrival. I want to tell you about 3 specific things that are in the process of moving in your life right now. Not things that might happen if you do everything right. Things that are already in motion, that are already being arranged in the invisible architecture of your next season, that are already finding their way toward you through channels you have not yet been able to see. I am going to describe each one with as much specificity as I can, because generality is the enemy of faith. You anchor yourself to something vague. You need something precise enough to hold on to when the evidence is slow to arrive. The first thing that is shifting is your interior world. This is the one people underestimate the most because it does not show up in a way that other people can immediately see or validate. But it is the most foundational shift of all, because every external transformation that is coming begins here. What is changing in your interior world right now is the quality of your knowing. For a long time in this season, the knowing you carried has felt like a burden more than a gift. The deep certainty that you were made for something specific, has been sitting in tension with the reality that the something specific has not yet fully manifested. And that tension has been exhausting. It has felt like carrying a map to a destination you have not been able to reach. But something is shifting in the quality of that knowing right now. It is becoming less like a burden and more like a compass, less like an accusation about where you are not yet, and more like a reliable orientation toward where you are going. You are going to notice in the coming days and weeks that your internal clarity is sharper than it has been, that the questions you have been for years are beginning to feel less unanswerable and more like questions whose answers are finally close enough to sense, that the peace you have been chasing is beginning to settle in you without being contingent on your circumstances matching what you believe. That settling is not resignation. It is arrival. It is the beginning of operating from a grounded center rather than from the reactive perimeter of your fears. What you should not do in this shift is rush it. The clarity that is coming does not need your help to arrive. What it needs is space, which is why the 7 minutes of practiced silence we talked about in part 3 is not just a nice practice for good days. It is the discipline that creates the interior room for the clarity to land without being crowded out by noise. Do not fill every moment of quiet with something. The quiet is working. Trust what the silence is doing, even when you cannot hear anything happening inside it. What you can trust in this shift is that the confusion you have been carrying is not a permanent state. It was a condition of the wilderness, and the wilderness is ending. The clarity that is replacing it is not the shallow confidence of someone who has never been tested. It is the deep settled knowing of someone who has been through the fire and come out understanding something about themselves that comfort could never have taught them. The second thing that is shifting is your relational landscape. And I want to be honest with you about the fact that this shift is not entirely comfortable, even though it is entirely necessary. What is happening in your relational world right now is a reorganization. People who were positioned in your life for a season that is now closing are beginning to create natural distance. And while that distance sometimes feels like loss, what it is actually doing is creating space for the people who are aligned with where you are going to move into proximity with you. You have probably already noticed this in some form. A relationship that used to feel easy now feels like it requires a performance you are not willing to give. A friendship that used to sustain you now feels like it is subtly asking you to stay smaller than you are becoming. A connection that felt important a year ago now feels like it is quietly fading without a dramatic ending. These movements are not failures. They are not evidence that you did something wrong, or that you are too difficult to be around, or that the people leaving you are your enemies. They are the natural consequence of growth. When you change, your relational ecosystem changes with you. And the people who were designed for the next chapter of your life are not the same people who were designed for the chapter you are completing. What you should not do in this shift is chase the people who are leaving. Do not compress yourself back into the shape you used to be in order to keep a connection that the season is already releasing. The compression is what costs you the most in extended seasons of delay. You were made to expand, not to manage your expansion in order to fit into containers that were sized for a smaller version of you. Let the people who need to go, not with bitterness, not with the narrative that they failed you, or that relationships always end badly for you, or that you are fundamentally alone. Let them go with gratitude for what the season held, and with your eyes open for what is moving toward you from the other direction. What you can trust in this shift is that the people who are coming are people who will not require you to apologize for the size of your calling. They are people who carry something complementary to what you carry. People whose presence will amplify rather than diminish what is inside you. People whose timing of arrival in your life will, when you look back from a future vantage point, seem almost incomprehensibly precise. They are already in motion toward you. Some of them you will recognize immediately. Some of them will surprise you. But none of them will ask you to be less than you are. The third thing that is shifting is your access to resources and opportunity. And I want to be careful here, because this is the area where the language of breakthrough most often collapses into cliché, and I do not want to give you cliché. I want to give you something true. What is shifting in this area is not that money is going to fall from the sky, or that opportunities are going to appear that require no effort or discernment on your part. What is shifting is something more specific and more significant than that. It is the alignment between your gifts and the doors that those gifts are designed to open. For a long time in this season, you may have felt like you were working hard without the work landing in the right places. Like you were knocking on doors that were not quite the right doors. Or like your gifts were visible to people who could appreciate them, but not to people who were in a position to connect them to their proper assignment. That misalignment is ending. What is coming is not a flood of generic opportunity. It is specific access. The kind of access that appears when a person is finally standing in the right location for their particular gift to be seen by the right eyes at the right time. What you should not do in this shift is force it. Do not try to manufacture access through the channels that have not been working. Do not knock harder on the doors that have not opened. One of the most important disciplines of the chosen one in a transitional season is knowing when to stop pushing against a closed door, and when to simply turn around and notice that a different door behind them has already swung open. The energy you spend forcing doors that are not yours is energy you cannot bring to the door that is. Conserve it, orient it. Watch for the openings that come with a quality of ease that feels different from the doors you have been pushing against. Not ease as in no effort required, but ease as in the sense that you are moving with something rather than against it. That sensation is a signal. Pay attention to it. What you can trust in this shift is that your gifts have not been wasted in the wilderness. Every expression of what you carry, even in seasons when no one seemed to notice or respond, was accumulating something. A track record of faithfulness that the invisible world has been observing even when the visible world was not paying attention. The fruit of that faithfulness is not lost. It is being redirected towards soil that can actually receive it and produce a harvest that is proportional to what was planted. Your gift is not too late for its assignment. It is arriving at its assignment on the Kairos timeline we talked about in the last section. The appointed time that is governed not by the clock, but by the convergence of conditions that only the sacred timing of your story could have assembled. I want you to do something right now, not later, now. I want you to place one hand on your chest and take one slow breath. And in that breath, I want you to make a conscious agreement with what is shifting. You do not have to see all of it to agree with it. You do not have to feel ready to agree with it. Agreement is not the same as certainty. Agreement is the posture that says, I am going to cooperate with what is moving rather than hold myself back from it, out of fear that I will be disappointed again. That posture, that simple willingness to lean into the shift rather than brace against it, is one of the most powerful things you can do in this moment. If you feel the shifting in at least one of these three areas, if something in what was just named landed in your chest as something you recognize, I want you to type "I'm here" into the comments below, not as a performance, as a marker, a way of saying I was present for this moment, and I am choosing to acknowledge what is moving rather than dismiss it. This message is reaching chosen ones all across the world right now. You are not reading it in isolation. You are reading it in a room full of people who are in the same transitional season, who are feeling the same interior shifts, who are standing at the same threshold. The community of the called is larger than your individual experience of it. You are not alone in what you are carrying, and you are not alone in what is coming. Share this message with one person who needs to hear about the 3 shifts, not for engagement, because someone in your circle is in season and does not have the language for what they are feeling yet. Your share might be the moment the language finds them. What is shifting is real, and it is shifting now. The 3 shifts we just named are not arriving into a vacuum. They are arriving into a person, a specific, particular, irreplaceable person who has been shaped by everything this season has required of them. Before we talk about what comes next, before we look at the practical landscape of what the shifts are going to produce in the 3 concrete areas of your life, I want to do something that this kind of message rarely takes the time to do. I want to name who you are becoming, not in broad strokes, not in the general blessing, in the specific, precise language of someone who has been watching what this season has done to you and has seen, in the doing of it, the emergence of something that deserves to be called by its proper name. You are a cycle breaker. I want to explain what that means, because it is not simply a motivational label. It is a description of a specific function that certain people are designed to carry in the world. And the reason it applies to you is rooted in the exact nature of the wilderness you have been walking through. A cycle breaker is someone who enters a generational or systemic pattern that has been running in their family, their community, or their environment. A pattern of silence, of limitation, of pain that has been passed from one generation to the next, without anyone fully recognizing that the pattern was a pattern, rather than simply the way things are, and who carries enough interior strength and enough willingness to bear the discomfort of being different to interrupt that pattern at their own generation. Cycle breakers do not always know that is what they are doing while they are doing it. They often simply know that they cannot keep living the way the pattern has required people to live. They know that something in them refuses to repeat what was modeled before them, even when refusing is the harder and lonelier path. They know that the silence that their family or community has normalized is a silence they cannot inhabit without losing something essential about themselves. The reason this applies to you is not that you sat down one day and decided to be a pattern interrupter. It is that the patterns you were born into could not contain what you were carrying, and the friction between the pattern and the gift created the discomfort that has driven you through every hard season you have navigated. You did not choose the friction, but you survived it, and the survival of it, the refusal to be fully absorbed into the patterns that your environment was trying to impose, has produced in you a capacity that is genuinely rare. The capacity to hold the history of where you came from without being determined by it, to carry the story of your people without being imprisoned by it, to break by your own becoming a cycle that would otherwise have continued through you into the generation that comes after you. That is not a small thing. It is one of the most significant things a human being can do. And I want you to understand something about the cost of that function, because cycle breakers almost always pay a price that other people in their environment do not understand. The price is the isolation of being the one who sees what others cannot yet see. The loneliness of being the one who refuses what everyone around them has accepted. The grief of loving people who are still inside the pattern while you are standing outside it, unable to pull them out, but unable to go back in. Cycle. Breakers often describe feeling like they belong fully to neither world. Not entirely to the world they came from, because they have changed in ways that world did not anticipate. Not yet entirely to the world they are moving toward, because that world has not yet fully materialized. They stand in the threshold between the two, and the threshold is not a comfortable place to live, but it is a necessary place to be, because the threshold is exactly where the breaking happens. And the breaking is exactly why you were placed here. I want to give you a guided practice now, a moment of an intentional visualization that I want you to participate in fully, not as an exercise, but as an act of recognition. Because recognition is the first form of reception. You cannot fully receive what is coming if you have not yet recognized where you are standing. Picture yourself standing at a threshold, not a metaphorical threshold in the abstract sense, a literal doorway. You are standing in the frame of a door, 1 foot on each side, and you can see in both directions. Turn first and look behind you. Look at the landscape of where you have been, not to relive the pain of it, but to see it clearly for what it is. See the years. See the rooms where you sat with weight you carried alone. See the moments of hope that were followed by disappointment. See the relationships that did not survive the season. See the versions of yourself that you had to leave behind because they were not strong enough to carry what was coming. See all of it, not through the lens of regret, through the lens of a person who walked through all of that and is still standing. You did not break under the weight of what you carried. You were refined by it. The person looking back at that landscape is not a victim of it. The person looking back at that landscape is the proof that it did not win. Now turn forward. Look at what is ahead of you. It may not be fully visible yet. The details may be unclear. The specific shape of what is coming may still be forming in the distance. But notice this. The quality of the light ahead is different from the quality of the light behind you. There is something in the direction you are facing that carries a warmth, a sense of space, a sense of possibility that the landscape behind you did not contain in the same measure. You do not need to see every detail of what is ahead to recognize the quality of it. You only need to notice that it is different, that it is open, that it is moving toward you as much as you are moving toward it. And now notice where you are standing. You are in the threshold. You are already there. You are not standing at a distance from the door, wishing you could approach it. You are in it. Your feet are already crossing it. The choosing of this moment, the showing up for this message, the willingness to sit with the hard things that were named in the sections before this one, that was the movement that placed you in the threshold. You did not stay behind. You came, and coming was the act that mattered. The threshold is not a waiting room. It is the crossing itself. I want to speak a few words of blessing over you now, not as a performance, not as a formula, as a genuine act of recognition from this message to the person who received it. May the clarity that has been forming in the quiet of your wilderness season now begin to find expression in the visible dimensions of your life. May the words that have been locked inside you during the season, when speaking them, felt too vulnerable, begin to find their voice and their audience in the coming days. May the relationships that were lost in the refinement be replaced with connections that are more accurately aligned with who you actually are and where you are actually going. May the grief that you have been carrying about, the time that passed find its resolution, not in the erasure of what was hard, but in the recognition of what the hard things produced. May the self-trust that was eroded in the wilderness begin to be rebuilt with each small step you take in the direction your internal compass has been pointing. May the gift inside you, the specific, particular, irreplaceable thing that was placed in you before you had words for it, find its proper audience, its proper platform, its proper season of expression in the time that is now arriving. May the pattern that you were born into, but were never meant to be confined by end with you. May the generation that comes after you inherit a different story because of what you were willing to carry and what you were willing to break. May the silence that was passed down through the people who loved you but did not know how to change be broken by the voice you are now finding. You are not just living your own life. You are rewriting what is possible for everyone who comes after you. May the waiting that has been your companion for this long season be recognized when you look back from the other side of what is coming as one of the most precise and purposeful preparations you could have received. May the door that is opening in front of you be entered with the full weight of everything you have become, without apology, without the shrinking that the wilderness required of you, without the edited version of your dream that you learned to offer for protection. The person you are in this moment, standing in this threshold, carrying what you carry, having survived what you survived, is not a person who needs more preparation before they are ready to step forward. You are ready. You have been ready since the moment you arrived here, and the step forward is not a leap into the unknown. It is a step into what was always designated for you, into the space that has been held open by the appointed time, into the life that has been assembling itself on the other side of the door while you were being assembled on this side of it. You are a cycle breaker. You are standing in the threshold, and the crossing has already begun. Type "I receive this" into the comments if these words landed somewhere real in you. Not because the comment changes anything about what is true, but because saying yes out loud, even in the small form of typed words on a screen, is an act of agreement with your own becoming. And agreement has a momentum that silence does not. The threshold is not behind you. You are in it. And what is on the other side has been waiting a very long time to meet the person you have become. You are standing in the threshold. You have been named. You have been seen. You have sat with the cost of the wilderness, and you have received the language of what the wilderness was building in you. And now I want to do something that this message has been building toward from the very beginning. I want to get practical, not in a way that reduces everything we have talked about to a to-do list, but in a way that honors the truth that faith without corresponding action is an incomplete circuit. The current has to move through something in order to produce light. And what I am about to give you is the wire. Because here is what I know about chosen ones in transitional seasons. They can receive a message like this one. Feel it land in every true place inside them. Feel the recognition. Feel the shift. Feel the tears or the quiet certainty or the specific unnamed emotion that tells them something real just happened. And then close the video and walk back into their life and change absolutely nothing. Not because the message was not real, not because the recognition was not genuine, but because the gap between interior shift and exterior action is one of the most consistently underestimated distances in the human experience. And closing that gap requires something more specific than inspiration. It requires instruction. It requires the answer to the question that is now forming in you, if it has not already formed. The question is simple, and it is the right question. What do I actually do now? I am going to answer that question in 3 parts, Map to the 3 areas of your life that are already shifting: relationships, purpose, resources. And in each area, I am going to give you something concrete, something you can hold in your hands and begin before this week is over. The first area is relationships, and the action that belongs to this area is an audit that is done not with a spreadsheet, but with your energy. Here is what I mean. For the next 7 days, I want you to pay attention to how you feel after you spend time with the people in your regular orbit. Not during, after. Because during a conversation, we are often in performance mode, managing the interaction, being socially appropriate, saying the right things. The truth about a relationship often does not land until after you leave the room. After a conversation, after a gathering, after a phone call, how do you feel? Do you feel expanded or contracted? Do you feel more like yourself or less like yourself? Do you feel like something in you was seen and met? Or do you feel like you spent the entire time holding a version of yourself together for the benefit of someone else's comfort? Take note, not to immediately cut anyone off, not to create drama or issue ultimatums or rewrite your social world overnight, simply to get honest data. Because the relational reorganization that is coming in your life needs your cooperation. And your cooperation begins with your willingness to see clearly what is actually feeding you and what is quietly draining you. There is also an action on the receiving end of this relational shift. I want you to make yourself findable, not in a performative public way if that is not where you are right now, but in the specific, intentional way of showing up in the spaces where the people who are aligned with your next chapter are likely to be. The new connections that are coming toward you are not going to appear in the exact same rooms where the old connections lived. They are going to appear in the spaces you move into as you begin to step toward what is coming. So take one step this week toward a space that is aligned with where you are going rather than where you have been. It does not have to be large. A community, a gathering, a conversation with someone you have been meaning to reach out to, who carries something that resonates with what you are moving toward. One step, one intentional movement toward the relational landscape of your next chapter rather than a continued waiting in the relational landscape of the chapter that is closing. What you can trust in this area is that the people who are coming are already in motion. They are not static, waiting for you to perform some perfect action that unlocks their arrival. They are moving toward you along the same timeline that is moving toward them. Your job is not to manufacture the connection. Your job is to be in the right vicinity when the connection is ready to be made. Show up in the spaces that belong to your next chapter. The people who belong to your next chapter will be there. The second area is purpose. And this is the area where chosen ones most commonly get stuck because the question of purpose tends to feel enormous. It tends to feel like a destination that has to be identified in its entirety before any movement is possible. Like, you need to see the whole map before you can take the first step. And the waiting for the complete map is what keeps people standing still in seasons, when even a single step in the right direction would begin to change everything. So I want to reframe the question for you. Not, what is my full purpose? That question is too large for right now. The question that belongs to this moment is simpler and more actionable. What is the one thing I know I am supposed to do that I have been not doing? Not the 20 things, not the complete life overhaul. The one thing. The thing that has been sitting in the back of your knowing for months or years, that keeps surfacing when the noise quiets down, that appears in the quiet of the 7-minute practice, that you keep pushing back with the explanation that the timing is not right, or you are not ready, or the conditions are not yet in place. That one thing. I want you to write it down today. Not on your phone where it will be buried in a list of other things. On paper, with your hand. Because the physical act of writing something by hand creates a different kind of commitment than typing does. It slows you down enough to be fully present to what you are writing. It makes the thing tangible in a way that a note on a screen does not. Write the one thing. And then, before this week is over, take one small action in the direction of that thing. Not the whole thing. One action. A phone call that belongs to it, an hour of time given to it, a conversation with someone who knows something about it. One movement. Because the question of what you are supposed to do will not answer itself in the abstract. It answers itself through movement. The clarity that chosen ones are looking for about their purpose almost never comes before they start moving. It comes in the moving. The step reveals the next step, but the first step has to be taken on the basis of what you already know, without waiting for the certainty that only the taking of the step can produce. And here is what I want you to trust in this area. The thing you have been carrying in the back of your knowing, the one thing that keeps surfacing despite your resistance to it, is not random. It is not wishful thinking. It is not a distraction from your real purpose. It is the signal, the specific, personal, impossible to manufacture internal signal that is pointing you in the direction of your assignment. The fact that it has stayed with you through the wilderness, that it has survived the seasons of disappointment and self-doubt and the erosion of trust that we talked about in part 5, that it is still there, still surfacing, still making itself known, even when you would sometimes prefer it to simply go away and leave you alone. That persistence is the evidence of its authenticity. A passing interest does not survive a wilderness. What survives a wilderness is calling, and the calling has been surviving in you this whole time. The third area is resources and opportunity, and the action that belongs here is perhaps the most counterintuitive of the three. It is the practice of positioning rather than striving. Let me explain what I mean by that distinction, because it matters enormously for how you move in this season. Striving is the posture of someone who believes that the resources and opportunities they need are fundamentally scarce, that they exist in limited supply and must be competed for, and that the quality of their effort is the primary determinant of whether they will receive their portion. Striving is not always wrong. There are seasons where maximum effort is exactly what is required, but striving applied in the wrong season produces exhaustion without breakthrough, because you are pushing against a current rather than moving with one. And in this transitional season, where the shifts we talked about in part 7 are already in motion, striving is not your primary tool. Positioning is. Positioning is the practice of placing yourself in alignment with what is already moving toward you. It is the discipline of being in the right orientation, the right posture, the right location, so that when the door opens, you are standing in front of it rather than on the other side of the building, pushing against a wall. Positioning requires discernment rather than maximum effort. It requires the ability to distinguish between an opportunity that belongs to you and an opportunity that simply appears and demands your energy. Not every open door is your door. And one of the most important skills a chosen one in a transitional season can develop is the ability to sense the difference between a door that opens with the quality of peace and alignment that we talked about in part 7, and a door that opens simply because it is open and you are nearby. Here is the practical action for this area. I want you to identify one resource, one connection, one tool, one piece of knowledge, one environment that you have been aware of, but have been holding at a distance because of the story that it is not yet time. or you are not yet ready, or it is not yet within reach. Something that is actually available to you right now if you were willing to reach for it. Something that you have been circling without landing on, because the gap between where you are and what it represents feels like more than one step. I want you to take the step toward that one thing this week, not because the step guarantees the outcome, but because the step is the positioning. The step is you placing yourself in the right vicinity for the appointed time to find you with your hands open rather than folded in your lap. This is the moment in the message where I want to gently and without pressure bring the genius wave back into the conversation. Because what we have been talking about in these three practical areas, the relational audit, the one thing, the positioning, all of it requires a clarity of internal signal that is not always easy to access in the middle of a noisy, demanding, ordinary day. The genius wave is the tool that helps you access that clarity deliberately. The 7-minute practice that the drivers developed after that more than 30 years of research into brainwave states is not a supplement to the practical actions I just described. It is the infrastructure that makes those actions more precise. When you are operating from a brain that has been guided into the theta-gamma coherence we talked about in part 4, the relational audit becomes sharper because your discernment is clearer. The one thing surfaces with less interference because the noise that was burying it has been quieted. The positioning becomes more accurate because you are operating from a place of settled knowing, rather than from the anxious beta state management that most people are running on throughout their day. The link to the Genius Wave is in the pinned comment below. Normally priced at $49, available today for $39 through that link alone. Not through a search, not through any other channel. The pinned comment is the only source that carries the genuine product and the full 90-day money-back guarantee. The discounted window is limited in both time and in the number of people who can access it at this price. If what has been built in this message has been building in you the sense that the tool belongs to this season of your life, the time to act on that sense is not later. Later is where the appointed moment gets missed. Now is where the positioning happens. Everything I have just described in these three practical areas is available to you starting today. Not when you feel more ready, not when the circumstances are more favorable, not when the evidence of the shift is more visible in your external world. Today, with the level of clarity you have right now, with the one thing you already know, with the step that is already within reach. You do not need more preparation to begin. You were prepared in the wilderness. What remains is simply the movement. Type, "I am moving" into the comments if you are ready to take one of these 3 steps before this week is over. Not as an accountability mechanism that someone else will monitor, as a declaration to yourself, because the self that hears you declare it will begin to move in alignment with what was declared. And movement, even small movement in the right direction, is what transforms a transitional season into an arrival. The practical is not separate from the spiritual. It is the spiritual made visible, and making it visible is the next step. We have come a long way together in this message, and I want to begin this final part not with a new idea, but with a moment of recognition. Because you stayed. You did not click away when the message got heavy in part 5, when it named what the waiting had taken, rather than rushing past the cost toward the comfort. You did not leave when part 6 asked you to sit with ancient words and restructure your understanding of time itself. You stayed through the naming of the shifts and the practical actions and the guided visualization and the blessing over your becoming. And that staying that particular quality of presence you brought to this entire experience, is itself evidence of something I want to name before we close. The people who stay for a message like this one are not people who wandered in casually. They are people who were sent. You did not find this message. This message was routed to you through whatever combination of algorithm and providence and invisible orchestration conspired to place it in front of you at this exact moment in your life. And the fact that you are still here at the end of it means that something in you recognized it as yours from the beginning. You did not stay because the message was entertaining. You stayed because it was true. And truth has a gravity that pulls the right people toward it and holds them there until they have received what they came for. I want to thank you, not in the polite transactional way that one thanks an audience for their time. I want to thank you in the specific way that recognizes what it actually cost you to show up for this. Because showing up for a message like this one requires a particular kind of courage that does not always get acknowledged. It is the courage of someone who has been disappointed before, who has sat with hope that did not land the way they expected, who has heard words of encouragement and felt them light up something inside them, and then watched the daily reality of their life continue unchanged, and who chose to show up anyway, who chose to be present anyway, who chose to remain open anyway, even when openness has sometimes felt like the most expensive posture they could afford. That courage is not small, and I see it in the fact that you are still here. I want you to know something before we close this message. All across the world right now, as this message plays, other chosen ones are sitting with it in their own spaces. Someone is in a car parked outside a place they are not yet ready to go into, listening to this with their eyes closed. Someone is in a kitchen at an hour when everyone else in the house is asleep, holding a cup of something warm, letting these words be the only voice in the room. Someone is in a break room at work, headphones in, using the only 15 minutes of quiet they have in a day, because something told them this message was worth protecting that time for. Someone is on the other side of the world, in a different time zone, a different language background, a different set of circumstances, and they are feeling the same thing you are feeling right now. The same recognition, the same weight of the season being named, the same quiet certainty that they were not meant to stay where they have been. You are not reading this in isolation. You are part of a community of the called that is far larger than your individual experience of it suggests. The chosen ones are not rare in the sense of being almost non-existent. They are rare in the sense of being scattered, often in seasons where the isolation of their experience makes it difficult to recognize that others are walking through the same terrain. You have been in that isolation, but you have never been truly alone in it. And the community that is forming around this message, the thousands of people who have sat with these words and felt them land in the true places, that community includes you now. You are part of it. You belong to it. And it belongs to you. I want to give you one final practice before we close. Not a complex one. A simple act of release that I want you to participate in fully, because the transition you are stepping into deserves to be entered without the weight of everything you have been carrying through the season that is ending. I want you to picture yourself standing at a threshold. You have been in this image before. In part 8, when we looked back at the landscape of the wilderness and forward at the quality of the light ahead. I want to return to that image now for a different purpose. This time, I do not want you to look behind you or ahead of you. I want you to look down, at your feet, at the ground where you are standing. And I want you to see, placed there at your feet, everything that you have been carrying. through this season that does not belong in the next one. The grief about the time that passed. The self-doubt that the wilderness installed in you through its long silence. The fear that the next door will close the way the last ones did. The story that you are somehow behind, that you missed something, that the window has narrowed in ways that cannot be reopened. The weariness of carrying invisible weight through seasons that did not give you adequate rest. Place all of it there at the threshold. Not because these things were not real. They were real. But because the threshold is the place where what belonged to one chapter is left behind, so that the hands and the heart can be free for what the next chapter requires. You are not taking the wilderness with you through the door. You are taking what the wilderness built in you. The strength, the discernment, the deep interior knowing, the capacity for the specific weight of what is coming. Those things travel with you. The grief and the fear and the self-doubt, those stay at the threshold. This is what it means to make a genuine crossing, not to pretend the hard things never happened, but to consciously choose not to carry them into the space that was not designed to hold them. Leave them at the door and step forward with your hands open and your chest unencumbered by everything that was never meant to come this far with you. Now I want to ask you for something, and I want to ask it honestly, in the spirit of someone who means it. If this message reached you somewhere real today, if something in it named what you have been carrying, if the words about Kairos and Kava and the cycle breaker and the 3 shifts and the threshold landing somewhere true in you, I want you to share it. Not for me, not for a metric or a number or a performance indicator. Share it because there is someone in your life who is in this exact same season and who has not yet found the language for what they are walking through. Someone who woke up this Monday morning without anyone to name it for them. Someone who is carrying the weight of a calling they have not been given permission to name out loud. Your share could be the moment that changes that for them. Not later. Now, before you close this, that is the only ask. And if you are not yet subscribed to this channel, this is the community that keeps showing up in the seasons when the noise of everything else makes it hard to hear what is true. Subscribe so that the next message finds you when you need it, rather than requiring you to go looking for it in a moment when your energy for searching is low. Like this video if it served you. Not as a reward for the creator, as an act of generosity toward the next chosen one who is going to be deciding whether this message is worth their time. Your like is a vote that says it is. And if this channel has been a consistent voice for you in a season when consistent voices were scarce, consider supporting it through a donation. Not because the message was behind a paywall. It was not. But because the work of reaching the scattered ones, of finding the language for what the wilderness feels like from the inside, of creating a space where chosen ones can be named and seen and given something to hold on to, that work has a cost, and your support makes it possible for that work to reach the person who is sitting in a car right now, outside a place they are not yet ready to go into, needing exactly what you just received. If the genius wave met you somewhere in the middle of this message, if the science of the frequency and the simplicity of the 7-minute practice and the story of the woman who sat down in her kitchen on a Tuesday morning and found her way back to herself resonated with something that is already moving in you, and you know that it is a yes, it is waiting for you in the pinned comment below. No pressure. No manufactured urgency beyond what is genuinely true, which is that the discounted access is time limited and the window is real. If it is yours, it will feel like it is yours. And if it feels like it is yours, the time to reach for it is before the feeling becomes a memory of a feeling. You came here carrying something, and you are leaving here having had it named. That is not a small thing. The naming of a thing changes the relationship a person has with it. You are not the same person who pressed play at the beginning of this message. Something has shifted. Something has been acknowledged. Something has been given permission to exist more fully in the light rather than in the private interior where it has been living for too long. Go forward from this message as the cycle breaker you were named as in Part 8. Go forward as someone who knows the difference between Chronos and Kairos, who understands that the appointed time is not late, who carries the image of the braided rope as a reminder of what the tension of the wilderness was always doing. Go forward with the threshold protocol in your hands and the one thing written on paper and the relational audit underway and the positioning practiced rather than the striving maintained. Go forward knowing that you are not alone, that the community of the called is walking with you, that the message that found you today will find others because you were willing to share it. And go forward knowing that what was placed in you before you had words for it, the specific irreplaceable gift that this entire message has been circling, that gift is not waiting for permission. It has been ready. You have been ready. The threshold you are crossing is real, and what is on the other side has been assembled with a precision that the wilderness could not interrupt, and the clock could not measure, and the doubt could not cancel. It is yours. It has always been yours, and the step into it begins now.